We loved it so much last year that we are doing it again this year. Our What If series is back on Orange and Blue today. Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason, and a What If that is real recent, Mace. And we're going to be doing this with our What Ifs this year with some of them. But what if the Packers aren't called for holding when driving for the game-winning score in week 6? This one isn't going to have to take much for people to dig back in their memories for.
Yes, because, of course, at the time, it was a couple of bad teams, right? When they went into that game. What we didn't know then was Jordan Love was starting to turn that corner and soar. The Packers would end the season in the playoffs. So in terms of quality, this proved to be a pretty good win for the Broncos. But a holding call that there was a little bit of debate about against Elgton Jenkins. It happened, of course, when the Packers were down by 3. Jordan Love takes off, scrambles 4 yards to the 40. The Packers would have had 3rd and 6, but lickety split. They had just driven from their own 25-yard line into Denver territory quickly, and the holding penalty puts them back. They go 2nd and 20. And then a couple of plays later, PJ Locke gets the pick and the Broncos get the second win. But, man, this came at such an interesting juncture because if the Packers win this game and the Broncos are 1-6, 1 week from the trade deadline, Cease, are they making deals for players like Justin Simmons, Jerry Jeudy? Are they making those deals that week rather than waiting for the hours before the deadline?
Yeah, the trade deadline looks much different. The outcome of the season looks much different. My brain first goes to benching Russell Wilson then. Mm-hmm. So this is so impactful, and that's why this is such a thick conversation, because it changes everything for this team.
Probably even more so than beating the Chiefs, because I think this set up beating the Chiefs. You get this win, and the calls are starting to come in, but you're like, okay, we got to win here. We've got Kansas City coming in, played really badly against the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football just 10, 12 days before in Kansas City. You're thinking, okay, there's the stirrings of hope. Let's take it another week here and see what it looks like. And, of course, they took it another week. They defeated the Chiefs for the first time in 8 years. It felt good, felt grand at the time, but it led the Broncos to stand pat. And we can get to Russell Wilson, but let's start with all the trade rumblings about Jerry Jeudy that were going on, Cease, because in the end, the Broncos didn't come close to getting a day 2 pick, whereas trading him at that point, you weren't getting a 2nd round pick. But there are rumblings that a 3rd round pick was very much in play at the time.
Yes, and there's various rumblings, Mace, so we can either shoot it down or just talk about it, but there was rumblings of like a 3rd and a 5th.
Yeah.
You would have gotten 2 picks, maybe a 3rd and a 7th, something like that for Jerry Jeudy. And hell, it might have been Cleveland. Might have been, he might have ended up where he already ended up. So our What If series, the multiverse, he still goes to Cleveland. But the Broncos actually get assets back that they could use, that they could change in the draft. What if a Jerry Jeudy pick that you get at the trade deadline because you lost to Green Bay leads to Jared Wiley? Because you got that extra pick.
Oh, man. You got
think of the butterfly effect here, right?
Yeah, and it's sort of like the 2022 draft with Russell Wilson. What could you have done if you hadn't made that trade? We're going to get to that later on in the downtime here.
Yes.
But they got a 5th and a 6th round pick back for Jerry Jeudy in March. At that time, look, that's as much as you were getting at that time. I couldn't argue with that. But imagine if they make the deal 5 months earlier after a potential loss to the Packers on a last-second field goal. That 6th round pick's a 3rd round pick.
Yep.
That's the difference. And so that's where you start in this trip down the multiverse, is instead of a 6th round pick, you have a 3rd round pick. You mentioned Jared Wiley. I mean, another possibility, Cease, is maybe you're taking the third round pick because you'd have 2 third rounders, and maybe you're moving back up into round 2. And we're talking about somebody from the second round. You could go down the list, but it's interesting to start with Jared Wiley because as we're sitting here, even though we've talked about the potential of Lucas Kroll developing, and Sean Payton during minicamp referred to how much he liked Lucas Kroll, would the Broncos feel better about their tight end position if they had another guy in there? Yeah, I think they would. And you and I both know that was regarded as an internal need for the Broncos was tight end.
Yeah, it was. And then, well, we see how things shook out. Because of this win, it changes the future for Justin Simmons as well. So it's like, okay, you at the deadline, and I kind of want to throw Court into this conversation too, but like at the deadline, Justin Simmons could have found his way to a contender. That's a possibility for sure.
And if you had been in full sell mode then at 1-6, you get something rather than nothing.
Bumpkiss.
Right. You had to move on from Simmons for a couple of reasons, not the least of which, of course, is you're absorbing the $85 million cap crater over 2 years, including $53 million this year. Part of the thing that went into the decision on Justin Simmons was positional value and where you regard safeties compared to, say, interior defensive line, edge, etc. Because you could have cut DJ Jones in March, right? But you didn't to get savings. You cut Justin Simmons. And there are actually some sound reasons for that, not the least of which is the biggest problem with the Broncos on defense, even though we've talked about the pass rush win rate, which wasn't good. The biggest problem was that they couldn't stop the run, and they were getting beaten up front. And so even though DJ Jones wasn't great last year, he was also dealing with some injuries. He wasn't 100%. And so what did they do this offseason? They brought in John Franklin Myers. They signed Malcolm Roach. They gave themselves a better, beefier, deeper rotation up front. So they prioritized that. And Justin Simmons was a casualty. You lose to the Packers, you're 1-6, and the phone starts ringing on Justin Simmons, even if it's a third round pick, Cease. I mean, so basically we're sitting here talking about maybe picking up 2 extra third round picks, one for Jerry Jeudy, one for Justin Simmons. We haven't even discussed Courtland Sutton yet.
Right.
Then definitely I think you're talking about taking a couple of those third round picks and moving up into round 2. If you've got 3 third rounders, which I believe you would have had if you'd lost to the Packers. Because and that's the thing. I think the sell-off would have started before the Chiefs game. Because if we're in this multiverse, okay, butterfly effect thing. If you're making deals before the Chiefs game, morale-wise, personnel-wise, there's a good chance you're not beating the Chiefs. Even Patrick Mahomes sick.
Yeah.
So you're 1-7, which brings us to Russell Wilson, because I think Russell Wilson would have started that Chiefs game at 1-6. If the Broncos lose that game because they're in sell mode and clearly it's tear down and they fall to 1-7, Russell Wilson is not starting against Buffalo on the other side of the bye. Jarrett Stidham starting right then and there. It's not a whole thing of we need you to give up to delay the injury protection guarantee on your contract. It's Russ, we're 1-7. You're down. Stidham's up for the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we get a real shot of what Jarrett Stidham could be. Not just a couple of games where he doesn't look good.
Yeah.
We get to ride that wave with him. But, Mace, we know it probably wouldn't look good. So then my mind goes to the draft. If you bench Russell Wilson because you lost to the Packers, you're drafting your number 1 quarterback, Jaden Daniels. You're in that position. Now, we're all excited about Bo Nix. Let's go, Bo, right? But the Denver Broncos really liked Jaden Daniels. You would be in position with now more draft capital as well So let's say they were at 4, not at 2. Well, you could throw in some of those third rounders that you got for Justin Simmons and Jerry Jeudy if you wanted to move up, in addition to your number 4 overall pick and maybe a first rounder the year after that. But like, you would have been on a different path at quarterback than Bo Nix. You would have been for Jaden Daniels, and that would be exciting. Maybe not for the long term based on Jaden's play style.
Yes.
But that's the market that you're now in.
Well, the other thing also to consider here is, would Sean Payton have adapted what he was doing for Jaden Daniels if Jaden Daniels had become a possibility? Yes, because let's talk about this realistically here, okay? The Broncos end up 8-9, but they were 3-5 at midseason in reality. We're sitting here in this Broncos multiverse at 1-7, and they're putting Jarrett Stidham in. Okay. The last 9 games, how many do you think the Broncos win with Jarrett Stidham at quarterback?
Go through the schedule, because my mind goes to like 2.
At Buffalo.
Loss.
Minnesota home. You won that by 1 point. Russell Wilson comeback.
Loss.
Cleveland home. But Cleveland at home with Dorian Thompson, Robinson, PJ Walker.
That's probably a win.
I think you win that game.
But it would be a Jerry Jeudy revenge game if Jeudy was in Cleveland.
Yeah, but someone's got to get him the ball first.
Sorry, DTR, that ain't you.
Yeah, so
let's say that's a win.
So we're sitting here with the Broncos getting a win to improve to 2-9. By the way, in the midst of all this, like, people are probably angry if the Broncos win that game against Cleveland, because at this point, they are firmly in the conversation for the number 1 overall pick. They're going into that Cleveland game 1-9, having clinched the losing season, and it is tank for Caleb at that point, right? The question is, do you think Sean Payton might have? I don't think he would have. I think Sean Payton, even though he talked on the record while working for Fox Sports about Caleb Williams and said, hey, this is a guy you'd have a draft lottery for to prevent tanking. I think Sean Payton is fundamentally incapable of fully giving up on a season and fully giving up on a team.
Yes.
Which is why they wouldn't have gone 1-16. Okay? They beat Cleveland. So you go down to Houston, you lose. Okay? At the Chargers, this is interesting. It's the game where Justin Herbert got hurt, obviously. Ended his season. So I'm going to say they still beat the Chargers in this multiverse.
Okay.
So you are 3-10 headed to Detroit. Detroit, you get stomped.
Yeah.
3-11. And then in a must-lose game against New England, you lose.
Okay.
3-12.
Yeah.
Because remember, it took a Russell Wilson comeback just to make that thing interesting at the end. The Chargers come in, you win. So you're 4-12. And then you go to Las Vegas, and I think we can point to weeks 17 and 18, even though it's a butterfly effect thing. We can point to weeks 17 and 18 and say, we saw this team with Jarrett Stidham in those games. So that's why we'll keep those as the results that happened. So you're 4-13. But you're 4-13, Cease. And on the strength of schedule, guess what? You win the tiebreaker in the draft with Washington and New England. You're picking number 2.
Wow.
Which is Jaden Daniels territory. Mm-hmm. Now, then the question becomes, as you're evaluating these quarterbacks, do you love Jaden more than Bo Nix plus what? Plus another first-round pick? Plus a first-round pick next year? That's the question to answer here.
Yeah.
Like, are you even taking a deal from maybe Minnesota gets a little bit edgy? Okay. And Minnesota got J.J. McCarthy, but what if Minnesota thinks, hey, here's a possibility to get Drake May?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why we're talking about Jaden Daniels is by every account, Broncos QB board was Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix. With Jaden Daniels, we talked about this a lot in the pre-draft run-up. The Broncos had excellent intel on him. The connections with Sean Payton and Broncos staff with LSU were pretty deep. So clearly there was a lot they liked about Jaden Daniels. Even though you say Silas was going to take off and run. Mobility is a big part of it, but Jaden Daniels wants to become a pocket passer.
And he wants to kill you with his arm.
Yes,
and he goes deep.
Yes. There's, respectfully to Bo Nix, there's more arm talent there, arm strength, velocity with Jaden Daniels than with Bo Nix. What you're concerned about, obviously, is the body type, but
the play style, the body type.
The play style, the body type.
Mm-hmm.
But the dynamic element, and don't forget with Sean Payton, even though he wants that quarterback that has rhythm and timing, this is also somebody who wrung an awful lot out of Taysom Hill. So Payton likes getting creative. I think what I'm saying, Cease, is if the Broncos lose to the Packers, they have Jaden Daniels. They've got 3 third-round picks, so they hang on to one. I think 2 of them they use to move up into the second round. And then what type of second-round player are we talking about for the Broncos?
My mind goes to that run on wide receivers. So instead of Troy Franklin, would you prefer Ladd McConkey, right? Keep him away from the Chargers. But of course, my mind's always on skill position players, but there's in the second round, there's plenty.
Would 2 third-rounders have been enough to get to the top of the second round, though? Because remember, Ladd McConkey went 34th to the Chargers.
Mm-hmm.
So
what about with some of those pass rushers that fell? Let's think of their weaknesses or their perceived weaknesses. Pass rusher was one.
Okay, well, let's pass rusher, and even we're talking still about defensive line, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
At 38 and 39, Tavondre Sweat and Braden Fisk went off the board of the Titans or Rams. How do either of those strike you?
I got chills when you said Tavondre.
Yes.
So, yeah, that strikes me pretty good.
Yeah. Damn.
Now all of a sudden you're drafting Jaden Daniels, Tavondre Sweat, right?
Jaden Daniels, Tavondre Sweat, and then third round, okay. Maybe I think we're probably in the universe where even though you're still looking at edge, is Jonah Ellis still a Bronco?
I believe so. Yeah. They had him tied with somebody on that board, and they preferred the draft value of a pass rusher. So yeah, we could say in this multiverse, Jonah Ellis is still a Bronco.
Okay. So let's move on down the board here. Okay. So we're saying Jonah Ellis still
a Bronco,
still a Denver Bronco. They've taken 2 third-round picks. And they've moved up to get Tavondre Sweat. Oh, man. Okay.
Yeah. Nice.
All right. So, 4th round, you could get Jared Wiley and you wouldn't have had to move up. So, because now you could go receiver as well, because you haven't gotten a wide receiver yet. And some of the receivers we're talking about as we get into day 4. Of course, it's Troy Franklin, Javon Baker, Tez Walker. Those are some of the guys. Luke McCaffrey, you could have maybe moved up for at the end of
the third
round. Because, this is, man. It's possible you could still have Troy Franklin because, by the way, in this process, you still worked out Bo Nix.
Mm-hmm.
And Luke McCaffrey, of course, goes off the board at the end of round 3. So maybe it's still Troy Franklin. It could be Jared Wiley. But I think you're maybe still looking at Troy Franklin here, believe it or not, as I think about this.
Yeah.
And parse through it. Again, in this universe where you've traded up in round 2 to take a defensive lineman rather than a receiver. So you're still looking at needing a pass catcher there. So we're actually still talking, Cease, about the Broncos still needing a tight end.
Well, let's talk about receiver real quick. This show is so thick we could do an hour. But let's talk about receiver, because if you're trading Jerry Jeudy, potentially Courtland Sutton, then young guys are playing more. You're getting a longer look at Marvin Mims. Maybe if Brandon Johnson stays healthy, like you're getting a look at some of your young guys. And we've said it before as we're out at OTAs in the spring, like they've got talented wide receivers. They're unproven, but they're talented.
Yeah, a little bit more Brandon Johnson, a little bit more of Marvin Mims Jr. Look, and specific to Marvin Mims Jr., Jerry Jeudy was blocking him. This is the thing. If you trade Jeudy, Marvin Mims Jr. is playing most of the back half of the schedule. And you know what? I think we're going to find out with Marvin Mims Jr. that experience is going to help him, that he's going to sprout branches on the route tree. So perhaps you're looking at receiver and you're saying, you know what? We feel pretty good here. Pretty good about Marvin Mims Jr.'s prospects. Pretty good about Brandon Johnson playing a bit more. So, all right. Early fourth round. Maybe you don't trade up and you sit and wait, because, of course, the Broncos moved from 121 to 102. They got picked 235 back, but they sacrificed 207 and 136. So in this universe, the Broncos, they're keeping both of those fourth round picks.
Fourth rounders, right. So they have both fourth round picks.
And guess who's still on the board when you get to 121? A guy named Jared Wiley. Okay. So Jared Wiley's your pick at 121, right?
Yep.
Funny thing is, a tight end did go off the board at 121 to Seattle in that trade, but it was A.J. Barner from Michigan. So let's go to 136 here then, okay? Now, of course, in reality, the Broncos' next pick was at 145, and it was Chris Abrams-Drain. And then 147, they picked Audric Estime. They still have these two picks. But if you're picking if you're picking 136, do you go ahead and get Abrams-Drain right then and there, or are you looking elsewhere? Like, this is actually really interesting, because I actually think the running back run has happened at this point, right? So it's not the Braylon Allen went 134, 2 picks earlier. So if you want a running back, it's still probably Audric Estime. I'm actually going to say they pick Abrams-Drain at 136. Okay. At 145, they pick Audric Estime. And then at 147 here, okay, I'm going to throw a name out there and just tell me what you think at 147. Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
I like it. I like it a lot. In fact, I could say take him at Estime's pick.
Yes.
And then later in the draft, take Blake Watson. They could have drafted Blake Watson instead of Estime.
They could
passed
have.
on running back.
Yes. They could have.
Yeah.
They absolutely could have. I actually, the funny thing is, I'm not sure that we see a great deal of change here. Like part of the trade, they got pick 235 back, but they moved down from pick 207. I'm actually going to say that at 207, they still picked Devon Vele because they liked him a lot.
I hope so.
Yes. So Devon Vele is a 6th round pick rather than a 7th round pick.
But now imagine Devon Vele and that downfield stuff we've seen catching passes from Jaden Daniels. No offense to Bo Nix, but Jaden kills you deep. Yes.
Oh,
we have a special one for this show. Yeah.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay. Here's another thing. Is Zach Wilson on this team? Or have you decided that Jarrett Stidham is enough of a bridge?
You've seen enough of Jarrett Stidham that you could say bridge.
Okay.
It wouldn't all be bad with Jarrett. There'd be some flashes.
Yeah. There'd be some flashes. And you'd say, okay, running it back another year of the scheme. But what if Jarrett Stidham was just bad? Like, because Sean Payton said to us at the league meetings in Orlando that he didn't have enough on Jarrett Stidham to where his vision had changed, right? There just wasn't enough of a sample size. Well, if you're putting him out there against Buffalo and you're starting him 9 games, you do get a sample size.
You do get a decision.
Yes. And does that decision make you think, okay, this guy isn't enough of a bridge. Let's give Jacoby Brissett a call. Or let's reunite with Jameis Winston. Let's bring him back. I don't think that would have happened. Let's just say that the Jameis Winston changed the call there at the end of the season for the Saints didn't go over very well in a lot of circles close to Sean Payton. Right?
Right.
So Jameis Winston is now a Cleveland Brown.
I will give you this. How about they do what Washington did? You go get Marcus Mariota. You know?
And also now we're talking about a stylistic
match.
And this is another thing. The ideal situation is you want stylistic alignment between your starter and your backup. And that's why there's a case for Jarrett Stidham, rhythm and timing quarterback, right? Of course, there's also a case for Zach Wilson because Zach Wilson can take off and get some yardage with his legs. We talked about Bo Nix having that club in his back. So they both have attributes that make them a stylistic match as either an understudy or a brace to Bo Nix. I don't think you're talking about either of that being the case so much with Jaden Daniels. Probably Zach Wilson, I think, definitely has attributes that make him a stylistic match. But Marcus Mariota would be better. Marcus Mariota with not only more experience, but good experience. I mean, this guy started in the playoffs. He's been part of a team that won in the playoffs.
Right.
If you had to, and if something happened to Jaden Daniels, I'd feel a lot better about Marcus Mariota stepping in and running the offense for a few games than what we've seen, than what you have on hand right now.
Right. Now, to wrap up the show, Mace, and I hate to do this because this could lead to another 30-minute conversation, but I also think, what if Justin Simmons is on Baltimore? What if Courtland Sutton is with the Ravens? I'm trying to figure out how someone can stop the Chiefs from getting another Super Bowl. So what if Simmons goes to a contender and he helps that contender beat Kansas City, or Courtland Sutton beat Kansas City? Now it comes up with our show we're doing tomorrow. Our first Would You Rather, but maybe that's where my mind's at. I'm thinking ahead, but I'm like, could one of these guys have stopped Kansas City, please, if they traded him?
Where do you think he might have gone? What team do you think might have traded?
Which one, Simmons or Court? Because I think Baltimore would be in
Let's start with Simmons. Is he a Baltimore Raven?
Is he a Buffalo Bill? You know, I know the Bills got rid of all their safeties this year, but you know, think of that. Think of those.
Does he make the difference in that divisional round game?
Yeah.
Because Justin Simmons, I mean, he's the one who ball tracks Patrick Mahomes better than anybody in the game. Gets a key pick, and it's Buffalo who wins at Orchard Park in the divisional round. Wow. Buffalo, Baltimore, AFC Championship game. Respectfully to Buffalo, I think Baltimore wins that. Maybe Baltimore wins that because Lamar Jackson hits Courtland Sutton. Okay?
Right.
And then when we get to the Super Bowl, and perhaps without the juggernaut that is the human juggernaut that is Patrick Mahomes in the game, perhaps San Francisco takes the Super Bowl. And so think about that for a moment, because there's this whole thing of, I guess Brock Purdy can't win the big one. The Niners did not lose the Super Bowl because Brock Purdy was deficient, okay?
Right.
So that narrative would just be bye-bye. San Francisco effectively playing a home game in Las Vegas. It didn't help them against the Chiefs, but I think it makes a difference against Baltimore or Buffalo. The 49ers win the Super Bowl. Kyle Shanahan hoists the trophy. A lot of people with Broncos connections have a Super Bowl ring. And then Broncos country, even though you got Jaden Daniels coming in and there's all sorts of excitement and jerseys are flying off the shelves, there's angst because you're looking at San Francisco that won it all. It's a different kind of angst than Kansas City winning. Kansas City winning, it's like existential, right? You're looking at San Francisco and you're saying, what might have been? With all those people with Broncos connections, Kubiak's on the staff, Mike Shanahan looking down with pride, Kyle Shanahan coaching the team, even Randy Gregory getting a ring.
Mm-hmm. All because of one holding call.
Wow.
Exactly. And think
that's
of the
thing about
excitement.
This. And we didn't. And the best part about these shows, Steve, is we had no clue where this was going to start. I knew it was going to involve Jaden Daniels, right?
Sure.
Had no clue we'd be talking about. The Chiefs don't get a Super Bowl, but the 49ers do. And so there's it's certainly a less painful angst in Broncos country.
Right. And honestly, as a team, if I ran a team and it was time to rebuild, I'd start sending my good guys to teams that could beat the Chiefs, just to take them down. This was the year to beat them. They were down this year, and they won the Super Bowl. So either way.
Because right now, the Chiefs wide receiver core, such a problem last year. If they get Xavier Worthy up to speed, and yes, I use speed for a reason.
Yeah.
As my mother would say, bloody hellfire, buckets of blood.
I'm not exactly sure what that means, Mace, but I know
it's not good. It's not good.
I'll tell you what's good. Help us out on YouTube. How do you do that?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell
so that you
never miss a vid.
That's right. He's Andrew Mason. Follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay frosty.